Imagine this. You are standing in the middle of a galactic council chamber the size of a small moon, with delegates from 1,000 star systems watching on glowing screens, and every single one of them is laughing at you. Not because you cracked a joke. No, they are laughing because you are from Earth, the so-called primitive blue marble at the edge of the Orion Spur, and because your planet has just agreed to put its best soldiers against theirs in a contest of skill and survival. And what did you bring to represent humanity? A group of men and women in camouflage fatigues, carrying rifles that shoot bullets instead of plasma, led by a colonel with a permanent scowl and a cigar that seems surgically attached to his jaw. The entire galaxy thinks this is comedy hour, and somewhere deep down, even you are wondering if maybe they are right. Colonel Hawk Daniels did not care what the galaxy thought. His jaw was square enough to stop meteors, his eyes hidden under a pair of scratched aviators even indoors, and his patience thinner than the atmosphere on Mars. He stood at the center of the chamber, arms crossed, while holographic screens replayed ancient Earth footage of his old unit, the MACV-SOG, crawling through muddy jungles in some long-forgotten war. The alien delegates laughed harder with each clip. One replay showed soldiers using nothing but vines, mud, and sheer stubbornness to outwit a helicopter gunship. Another showed them wading chest-deep through swamp water to ambush a column of armored vehicles. To the aliens with their fleets of drones and quantum rifles, it all looked ridiculous. The laughter grew until it echoed like a storm across the chamber. The ambassador from Earth looked like he might faint at any moment. Sweat pooled under his collar as the coalition leader, a 12-foot insectoid with a crown of holographic jewels, asked in a voice like grinding metal if Earth truly wished to proceed with this challenge. Losing meant Earth would surrender political autonomy to the coalition for the next 500 years. Winning meant Earth would gain a permanent seat at the table of galactic power. It was a gamble no sane species would take. The ambassador opened his mouth, but before he could speak, Hawk stepped forward, cigar smoke curling like a battle standard. His voice cracked across the chamber like rifle fire. "We accept." That was when the chamber fell silent. The laughter stopped mid-breath. Alien delegates exchanged glances. The insectoid leader tilted his head. "Very well," it said, choosing its words with surgical slowness. "Your team will compete on Zero's 9. Even the aliens flinched at the name. Zero's 9 was not just another jungle world. It was a death trap, a living nightmare of predatory plants, hyper-intelligent beasts, and terrain so hostile even satellite drones refused to fly over it. For decades it had served as the proving ground for the Coalition's most elite forces. Soldiers entered. Few came back. It was perfect for humiliation. Perfect for proving that Earth's so-called warriors were nothing but insects waiting to be crushed. Back on Earth, Hawk gathered his old team with the same calm one might use when ordering coffee. Sergeant Miller was first, a broad-shouldered bruiser with a grin that promised trouble. He brought the muscle and, unfortunately for everyone else, the jokes. Next came Ramirez, the sniper whose sense of humor was as dry as the deserts he once crawled through. Then Chin, the demolitions expert who treated explosives like some people treated houseplants, speaking to them softly before blowing half a hillside into the stratosphere. And finally, Fingers. No one knew his real name. He carried an old acoustic guitar everywhere, swore it was for morale, and could hack into military satellites using nothing but a broken wristwatch and what he called pure charm. When Hawk told them the mission, none of them laughed. Not even Fingers. They had all seen jungles chew up men and spit out bones. But Zero's 9 was worse. Hawk explained the rules while they loaded gear into the transport ship. They had 1 month to survive and outmaneuver every other coalition team on the planet. They had to capture the enemy flag in the heart of the jungle and bring it back to base. Simple on paper. Impossible in reality. Especially when the enemy teams had exosuits, plasma cannons, and combat mechs while Earth soldiers had rifles, machetes, and grit. On the flight to Zero's 9, the team shared the kind of silence that comes before a storm. Outside the viewports, stars stretched into lines as the ship hit faster than light speeds. Miller leaned back in his seat and finally broke the tension. "So," he said with a grin, "anyone want to bet how long before the aliens start crying for their moms?" Ramirez did not even look up from cleaning his rifle. You mean before or after we embarrassed them in front of the whole galaxy? Hawk allowed himself the ghost of a smile. It was the closest thing to optimism anyone would get. As the ship descended through the atmosphere of Zeros 9, the team caught their first glimpse of the planet. Endless green jungles writhing like a nest of snakes. Rivers that glowed faintly red under the clouds. Storms gathering on the horizon like an army preparing for war. The air itself seemed to pulse with life, the kind of life that looked back at you from the shadows. Somewhere down there, elite alien soldiers were already setting up plasma shields and drone networks, preparing to hunt the humans like game animals. Somewhere down there, the jungle waited with teeth. The transport landed in a clearing barely large enough for the landing struts. Steam hissed as the doors opened. Hawk stepped out first, boots sinking into the wet soil. The air smelled of ozone and rot. Behind him, the team fanned out automatically, weapons ready. Somewhere in the distance, something screamed. It did not sound like any animal from Earth. It sounded like metal being torn in half. Miller grinned and slung his rifle over one shoulder. "Home sweet home," he said. The jungle did not laugh back. The first thing they noticed about Zeros 9 was that the planet seemed to breathe. The ground shifted underfoot like a restless animal, and the air pressed in heavy and wet, as though the whole place resented their presence. Leaves the size of parachutes dripped water in slow, steady beats that echoed through the clearing. The jungle felt alive in a way that made even the veteran soldiers of the MACV-SOG pause. Somewhere beyond the wall of foliage, a chorus of insect shrieks rose and fell like the chanting of some ancient, unfriendly god. It was the kind of place where you did not just watch your step, you questioned whether the ground itself wanted you dead. Hawk raised a fist, and the team froze. He scanned the perimeter, eyes hidden behind those battered aviators. The alien forces had landed kilometers away according to the intel, but he knew better than to trust anything here. Already, he felt the sensation of being watched. Not by soldiers. By the jungle. The thought lodged itself in his mind like a splinter. Hawk had fought in places that ate men alive, jungles where the enemy was not just the soldiers shooting at you but the snakes, the diseases, the hunger. Zeros 9 made those old battlefields look like picnic grounds. He spat his cigar stub into the mud and muttered, "All right, boys and girls, let's show the galaxy how Earth says hello." They moved out in single file, weapons up, cutting through vines and foliage that resisted every step like they were trespassing on sacred ground. The heat wrapped around them until sweat pooled under their collars. Miller cursed under his breath as another thorny vine clawed at his arm. The humidity was so thick it felt like drinking the air rather than breathing it. Every few minutes, the distant sound of alien engines rumbled through the canopy. Their opponents were out there somewhere, setting up plasma fences and automated gun platforms, convinced that technology alone would keep them safe. The thought made Ramirez smirk faintly as he trudged forward. Technology never saved anyone when the jungle decided it wanted you. By midday, they reached a ridge overlooking a clearing. Below, through gaps in the leaves, they saw the alien camp. It looked like something out of science fiction magazines, a neat little grid of glowing barriers, hovering drones, and armored soldiers moving with mechanical precision. Every tent was climate-controlled. Every weapon hummed with enough power to melt steel. It was the kind of setup designed to intimidate enemies who had never spent a night in a real jungle. The MACV-SOG team squatted in the mud and watched silently. Miller grinned and whispered, "Look at that. They brought a whole spaceship to a knife fight." Chin shook his head and replied softly, "Let them have their toys. The jungle does not care about toys." The aliens worked with loud confidence, shouting orders, unloading supplies, lighting up half the clearing with harsh white floodlights. It was the sort of noise only soldiers who had never been stalked at night could make. Hawk watched them through binoculars, his face unreadable. They had numbers, firepower, and every advantage technology could give them. But even from here, he could see the first mistake. They were cutting down trees around the camp to expand their perimeter. The freshly exposed stumps bled thick sap that steamed in the air, filling the clearing with a sickly sweet smell. The wind carried it into the jungle. The noise stopped. Not the noise of the aliens. The noise of the jungle. One moment it was a wall of insect calls and chittering predators. The next, silence as deep as a grave. Hawk felt his stomach tighten. The jungle had noticed. That night, as darkness fell like a closing fist, the first screams rose from the alien camp. Not battle screams. The kind that tore straight out of the throat before the mind even understood what was happening. Something moved in the treeline, fast and low, cutting through the soldiers like they were paper. The floodlights swung wildly. Drones fired plasma bolts into the dark, but nothing hit. The sound of tearing metal and cracking bone rolled through the trees. The MACV-SOG team watched from the ridge without speaking. Ramirez finally muttered, "Well, that did not take long." By dawn, half the alien camp was gone. Not destroyed in any orderly way. Just gone. Tents ripped apart. Armor scattered like toys dropped by a careless child. Plasma turrets bent at wrong angles. No bodies left behind. Whatever came in the night had taken everything. The survivors huddled near the center of the camp under the humming glow of their shield generator, eyes wide and sleepless. The jungle sang again, loud and triumphant. Hawk lit a fresh cigar and said nothing. The team packed up and moved before the aliens spotted them on the ridge. 2 days into the mission, the MACV-SOG finally encountered their first alien patrol. 6 soldiers in exosuits, moving cautiously along a riverbank, weapons glowing faint blue in the shadows. Hawk set up the ambush with the same calm he used to order breakfast. Chen rigged explosives along the path. Ramirez found a perch high in the trees with his sniper rifle. Miller dug into the mud with a grin like a kid hiding before a game of tag. Fingers sat behind a fallen log, tapping into the alien comm signals with a battered receiver that looked like it belonged in a museum. The aliens never knew what hit them. One moment they were advancing in textbook formation, the next they were flailing in mud traps, tripped by vines, blinded by smoke, and picked off one by rifle fire that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The entire fight lasted less than a minute. The survivors fled into the jungle, leaving behind shattered weapons and a calm unit Fingers immediately claimed for himself. Back at camp that night, Miller roasted ration packs over a small fire while Fingers strummed his guitar with complete lack of skill. The music sounded like 2 cats fighting in a tin barrel, but somehow it fit the mood. Ramirez cleaned his rifle in silence. Chen tinkered with explosives like they were puzzle toys. Hawk studied a map under the dim glow of a lantern. The galaxy had laughed at them, but so far, they had not lost a single man. The jungle had taken more lives than the enemy. Hawk exhaled smoke into the night, and muttered to no one in particular, "This place eats arrogance for breakfast." Somewhere far beyond the treeline, something screamed again. It was not the same sound as before. It was deeper. Closer. The team fell silent. Even Fingers stopped playing. The jungle listened with them. The screams in the distance did not stop. They moved through the jungle like a storm front, growing louder one minute and fading the next, always circling closer. Hawk ordered the team to break camp before sunrise. No one argued. Even Miller, who could make jokes while loading explosives under enemy trucks, stayed quiet. They moved fast through the undergrowth, cutting a path along a ridge where the ground rose above the choking vines. Twice, Ramirez raised a hand to halt them, his sniper scope scanning the canopy. Each time, they saw nothing. The jungle was alive with birds, insects, and the constant drip of water, but something else moved under it all, too big and too quiet to belong. By mid-morning they reached the river. It twisted through the jungle like a strip of silver, wide enough to swallow a small city. The current churned fast around jagged rocks. Hawk signaled a halt, scanning the treeline across the water. No movement. Too still. That was the problem. A living jungle was noisy. This one had started holding its breath more often. Hawk chewed on his cigar and felt the muscles in his jaw tighten. Something was hunting out there, and it was not them. The alien forces were not sitting still either. Distant flashes of blue light marked plasma weapons carving paths through the jungle. Drones hovered above the treetops, their hum low and steady like giant insects. Through the receiver he had stolen, Fingers intercepted alien chatter. They were panicking. Entire patrols missing. Camps wiped out in the night. Soldiers refusing to leave shielded perimeters after dark. Whatever was out there, it was not on any side. It was killing everything. Hawk studied the map and drew a line toward the central objective, the flag they needed to capture to win this ridiculous contest. It lay at the heart of the jungle where the terrain rose into cliffs and deep valleys. The shortest route cut straight through areas where alien patrols had gone silent. The longer route circled wide but risked running straight into coalition firebases. Hawk picked the short route. He trusted the jungle more than he trusted the aliens. By noon, they found the first signs. Deep gouges in the trees, as though something with claws the size of machetes had raked through the trunks. Scorch marks where plasma rifles had fired wildly in all directions. Half-buried pieces of exosuit armor bent like paper. No bodies. Ramirez crouched by one shredded helmet, its visor torn open like tinfoil. He looked at Hawk but said nothing. There was no need. Whatever could rip through alloy that strong did not leave survivors. They pressed on in silence, senses stretched tight. Even Fingers stopped humming under his breath. Miller's usual grin flattened into a thin line as he scanned the trees with his machine gun ready. Chin moved slower than usual, his eyes darting to every shadow. Hawk led them through the wreckage without breaking stride. Fear slowed men down. The only way through was forward. Near dusk they reached a ravine where roots clung to sheer walls like skeletal fingers. A narrow bridge of vines crossed the gap, swaying above mist that rose from the depths. Halfway across, Fingers froze. His receiver crackled with alien voices shouting over each other. Something was moving through their rear perimeter. Not soldiers. Not human. Not anything they recognized. The voices cut off in a burst of static followed by a single scream that ended far too quickly. They reached the far side of the ravine and set camp in the ruins of what looked like an old research station swallowed by trees. Metal walls sagged under roots as thick as a man's torso. Moss dripped from shattered windows. Inside, dust and leaves covered alien consoles long dead. Ramirez took a perch on the roof while Miller and Chin set traps along the perimeter. Fingers propped up his receiver and kept scanning the airwaves. Hawk paced the shadows, studying the darkness beyond the firelight. The first attack came just after nightfall. Not the creature. The aliens. A squad of them burst from the trees firing plasma rifles in tight formation. Blue bolts scorched through the ruins as the MACV-SOG team hit the ground and returned fire. Traps went off in sharp concussions, dropping 2 aliens before they reached the walls. Ramirez picked off another from the roof with a single clean shot. Miller cut loose with the machine gun, his whoops echoing over the firefight. The remaining aliens pulled back into the trees, leaving 2 wounded groaning in the dirt. Before Hawk could interrogate them, the jungle exploded. That was the only word for it. Trees shook. Branches snapped like dry bones. Something huge and fast slammed through the undergrowth, a blur of claws and teeth that hit the alien wounded first. One was gone before he even screamed. The other fired wildly, plasma bolts flashing through leaves, before he too vanished into the dark. The thing never slowed. It tore through the trees, chasing the retreating aliens with a speed that made no sense for something that size. Then silence fell again as sudden as a door slamming shut. Miller broke it first. What in God's name was that? His voice tried for humor but missed by a mile. No one answered. Ramirez scanned the treeline through his scope and muttered that he could not see it anymore. Chin checked the traps like a man checking paper walls against a hurricane. Fingers replayed the intercepted alien chatter. One phrase kept repeating in a dozen dialects. 009 Apex Predator. Classified. Banned under Coalition war protocols. Released by unknown faction. Hawk listened without speaking, jaw tight, eyes hard. He had fought wars where men were the worst monsters on the field. Now it seemed someone had decided even that was not enough. The night passed without further attack. The jungle around them stayed too quiet, as though waiting. At dawn, Ramirez reported movement near the ridge to the north. Alien troops. Dozens of them. But not moving toward the humans. Retreating. Whole squads pulling back toward their landing zones, abandoning equipment as they ran. Whatever hunted these jungles had turned the contest into a massacre. Hawk gathered the team around the burned-out console table at the center of the ruins. His voice stayed calm but carried the weight of stone. "We are not just fighting aliens anymore," he said. "Someone turned this whole planet into a killing ground." Miller spat in the dirt and asked the question hanging over all of them. "So what do we do now?" Hawk looked toward the northern ridge where the screams had faded with the night. "We adapt," he said. "Or we die like the rest of them." By the time the sun burned its way through the morning haze, the jungle looked different. Not calmer. Never calmer. But quieter in a way that felt wrong. The air carried the smell of burned metal from abandoned alien camps, and something else underneath, the coppery tang of blood already baked into the soil. The MACV-SOG team moved in tense silence through the ruins of what must have been the Coalition's forward base. No bodies again. Just scorched ground, shattered weapons, and the lingering sense that whatever did this was watching them even now. Miller muttered that at least the enemy seemed to be losing worse than they were. Hawk did not answer. He was listening to the jungle again. At the center of the wreckage they found what remained of the alien commander's dropship. It lay half-crushed against a tree the size of a skyscraper, its hull bent like it had been hit by artillery. Hawk climbed through the wreckage with Ramirez covering him from the ridge above. Inside, the walls were clawed to ribbons. A plasma rifle lay bent in half near the pilot's chair. And in the corner, trembling but alive, was the alien commander himself. A tall, armored figure with one arm bleeding through shattered plating, mandibles clicking with fear. Hawk lowered his rifle and signaled the others. This was no longer a war game. The enemy was just as hunted as they were. The commander spoke through a translator disc, its mechanical voice jittering with static. "The creature is beyond protocol. It should not be here." His eyes darted toward the jungle as though even the mention of it might bring the thing down on him. Miller asked what it was. The alien hesitated, then said its name in his own language, a sound like knives scraping together. The disc translated it as Scorneth. Apex predator native to Zeros 9. Hunted to near extinction centuries ago. Illegal in all Coalition conflicts. Whoever released it wanted every soldier on this planet dead. The admission changed everything. If the Scorneth killed them all, Earth would lose the contest by default. The Coalition Council would claim the humans failed, wipe their hands clean, and Earth would vanish under 5 centuries of foreign control. Hawk understood then this was not just sabotage. It was strategy. Someone wanted Earth crushed before it even joined the galactic stage. Someone wanted the Coalition forces humiliated too so there would be no witnesses left to question it. A convenient massacre blamed on one hungry beast. Hawk told the commander they would help him reach his remaining troops. Not out of mercy. Out of necessity. The only chance any of them had was to survive long enough to expose whoever had done this. The alien hesitated before agreeing, pride warring with fear, but the next distant roar made the decision for him. A temporary alliance it was. They set off together through the densest part of the jungle, the alien limping between Miller and Shin while fingers scanned for enemy signals. None came. Whole battalions had gone dark overnight. Once they passed a clearing where alien soldiers had made a last stand around a collapsed plasma fence. The trees around it were shredded to splinters. The fence lay twisted like wire ripped apart by giants. No tracks. No bodies. Ramirez muttered it was like the thing floated above the ground. No one disagreed. Near midday they stopped to rest beside a narrow stream where the water moved sluggish and brown. The alien commander explained between labored breaths that the Scorneth hunted by scent and sound but mostly by fear. It could sense the chemical spike when prey panicked, track it for kilometers. The best defense was to stay calm, he said, though his shaking limbs made it clear how useless that advice felt. Miller chuckled darkly and said then Ramirez might be invisible to it since nothing ever rattled him. Ramirez just kept scanning the trees, unmoved as always. It was Fingers who first picked up the transmission. Faint, buried under layers of static, but clear enough. A different faction of aliens broadcasting on encrypted channels, coordinates attached. They were not retreating like the others. They were hunting something. Hawk listened carefully as fingers cleaned up the signal. The words made his jaw clench tighter around the cigar. The rogue faction planned to lure the Scorneth toward both the humans and the remaining coalition troops, wipe everyone out, then trigger a self-destruct on the command ship in orbit to erase all evidence. Blame would fall on Earth for bringing some supposed illegal bioweapon. Convenient, efficient, and fatal for everyone still breathing. Hawk laid out the situation to the team while the alien commander listened, mandibles clicking in rage. This was bigger than any of them now. Stopping the rogue faction was the only way any of them survived long enough to win, or even leave this planet alive. The alien commander swore vengeance in words the translator refused to repeat. The temporary alliance solidified into something harder. Mutual survival. That night they reached a canyon cutting across the jungle like a scar. Across the gap glowed the lights of the rogue faction's base, plasma towers stabbing into the dark sky. Drones circled above it in precise orbits. Through binoculars, Hawk saw cages along the perimeter, huge ones reinforced with energy fields flickering faint blue. Empty now. That was where the Scorneth had been kept before its release. Hawk felt a cold weight settle in his gut. This was no act of desperation. It had been planned for weeks. They camped under the canyon rim while Ramirez scouted routes down. The alien commander's remaining troops met them there, less than 20 survivors from what had been a full battalion. They looked hollow-eyed and jumpy, plasma rifles clutched tight. Yet when Hawk explained the plan, when he told them about the self-destruct waiting to erase every witness, they listened. Some out of duty. Most out of raw terror. If the Scorneth did not kill them, the explosion would. As darkness fell, the rogue base lights cut swaths through the trees, harsh and sterile against the living shadows. Somewhere beyond those walls the conspirators believed they were safe. Hawk watched them through binoculars while chewing his cigar down to a stub. Beside him, Miller loaded belts of ammunition with a grin that looked more like bared teeth. Fingers tuned his receiver to the base frequencies, muttering about backdoors and override codes. Chin checked detonators in neat rows like a priest blessing relics before battle. Even the alien commander stood straighter now, fear tempered into something colder. From the depths of the jungle behind them, the Scorneth roared again. Closer this time. The sound rolled across the canyon like thunder. Every soldier there felt it in their bones. Hawk exhaled smoke into the night, and said the only words that mattered. Tomorrow we hunt them all. Dawn broke with a sky the color of ash. The rogue base still glowed across the canyon, its towers humming faintly while drones circled in perfect, mechanical loops. Hawk studied it from the ridge as the team gathered around a rough map scratched into the dirt. The plan was insane even by their standards. They would lure the Scorneth straight through the rogue faction's defenses, forcing chaos inside the base while Fingers hijacked their communications to expose the plot to the entire coalition fleet overhead. The aliens would be too busy surviving to stop the broadcast. It was simple, brutal, and dangerous enough to work. Miller grinned while loading belts of ammunition across his shoulders. So we are bait now. Hawk chewed his cigar and said nothing. Everyone knew he was right. The only way to draw the creature was to make noise, movement, and the kind of mess the Scorneth could not resist. Ramirez would take the ridge as overwatch, picking off any patrols before they reached the team. Chin rigged explosives along the eastern approach to funnel the creature straight toward the front gates of the base. Fingers tuned his receiver, muttering about encryption layers and override codes while the alien commander watched with arms crossed, his surviving soldiers looking like they were marching to their own funerals. They moved at noon when the sun burned through the mist. The jungle felt heavier than ever, as though it knew what was coming. Every step toward the base brought them closer to the kind of chaos no one walked away from clean. Miller started the noise with a mounted machine gun ripped from an abandoned coalition dropship. The staccato roar rolled through the trees, echoing off the canyon walls. Chin set off the first line of charges in a series of sharp concussions. Trees toppled. Smoke rose. Ramirez picked off drones from the ridge with precise shots that left trails of falling metal through the canopy. The message was clear to every living thing in that jungle. Here we are. The first roar came minutes later. Deeper this time. Closer. The Scorneth crashed through the undergrowth behind them like a living avalanche. Trees splintered under its weight. Shadows bent around its speed. No one saw more than flashes of claws and armor-plated hide, but its presence filled the air like a physical force. The rogue faction inside the base panicked exactly as planned. Searchlights swept wildly across the jungle. Plasma turrets fired into the trees before their targeting systems even locked on. The perfect storm was building. As the team fell back toward the base gates, Fingers finally cracked the enemy comms. His voice cut across every coalition frequency, broadcasting live footage from stolen drones showing the Scorneth tearing through rogue patrols like paper. He spliced and intercepted orders about the self-destruct charges hidden on the command ship above. Voices from the coalition fleet started shouting over each other across the channels. The trap was unraveling in real time for everyone to hear. Then the Scorneth hit the outer perimeter. One moment the walls stood firm behind layers of plasma shields. The next, the creature slammed through them like glass, claws shearing metal, tail whipping a drone from the sky with a single blow. Soldiers opened fire in panicked volleys. Plasma bolts lit up the courtyard in blinding flashes. The thing moved through it all like smoke and lightning combined, too fast for its size, too strong for anything to stop. Screams rose over the gunfire. The gates fell under its weight, and the base dissolved into chaos. Hawks signaled the push. The MACV-SOG team and the surviving coalition soldiers charged through the breach behind the monster, gunfire snapping over their heads. Miller cut loose with the machine gun, mowing down rogue troops who tried to regroup near the command tower. Chen's explosives took out plasma turrets along the walls in concussive bursts that shook the ground. Ramirez picked off snipers before they even found their sights. Fingers sprinted straight for the central comm array, guitar strapped to his back as though this was just another day at the office. Inside the courtyard the fighting turned savage. Rogue soldiers fired in all directions, some at the Scorneth, some at the attackers, many at shadows that might have been either. The creature slammed through the command tower itself, tearing chunks of alloy free with claws like blades. Hawk and the alien commander fought side by side through the lower levels, clearing rooms with brutal efficiency while alarms wailed above them. Every few minutes Finger's voice cut through the noise, announcing to the entire coalition fleet that the sabotage plot was confirmed, evidence transmitting now, charges detected on the command ship, recommend immediate lockdown before someone pushed the button. It almost worked cleanly. Almost. But Chaos never stayed on a leash. The rogue faction's leader, a tall alien in black armor, made a break for the self-destruct control hidden in the command center. Hawk's team intercepted him halfway up the tower stairs. Plasma fire scorched the walls as they traded shots in tight quarters. The alien commander cornered the traitor on the upper platform, shouting words the translator barely kept up with. Accusations? Betrayals? Names of co-conspirators spilling out as the traitor laughed through broken mandibles about how none of them would leave this planet alive. Then he hit the trigger. The sky above the jungle lit with the distant flash of the command ship's engines overloading. The self-destruct countdown had started. Fingers cursed into the comms, demanding access to the control uplink before the whole place turned into a crater. Hawk ordered Ramirez and Miller to hold the base perimeter while he, Fingers, and Chen fought their way toward the uplink room on the top floor. Plasma bolts stitched the walls as they climbed. Debris fell around them. The Scorneth roared through the courtyard below, tearing apart the last of the rogue soldiers as though it understood none of this mattered if the sky itself was about to fall. They reached the uplink with less than 5 minutes on the countdown. Fingers dove into the console like a man defusing a bomb blindfolded. Chen rigged charges along the stairwell in case more rogue troops tried to break through. Hawk stood at the window watching the creature tear through the base below while the alien commander's surviving soldiers fell back toward the canyon, dragging wounded with them. The jungle burned at the edges where plasma fire had caught the trees. Smoke turned the sky black. 1 minute left. Fingers ripped panels from the console, wires sparking under his hands. The command ship's engines powered toward critical mass in orbit above. Finally, with seconds to spare, he found the override buried under layers of encryption and slammed the shutdown command through every channel at once. The countdown froze at 6 seconds. Engines cooling. Catastrophe halted. The rogue leader lay dead on the stairwell where the alien commander had left him. The base burned. The Skornith vanished back into the jungle as suddenly as it had come, leaving only wreckage and silence behind. And for the first time since landing on Zeros 9, Hawk allowed himself to believe they might actually live through this. The jungle was still burning when the Coalition rescue dropships arrived, engines screaming through the smoke-filled sky. The command ship in orbit had been locked down under emergency control, its rogue crew arrested before they could restart the self-destruct sequence. Across every Coalition channel the evidence fingers broadcast played on repeat, the intercepted transmissions, the detonator codes, the images of the Skornith tearing through soldiers while the rogue faction watched from safety. There was no spinning it now. The plot to destroy Earth's chances in the contest and wipe out the witnesses had failed. The galaxy knew it. The Council knew it. And Hawk Daniels, standing in the courtyard surrounded by smoking walls and spent ammunition, knew it too. The alien commander limped through the wreckage toward Hawk, armor scorched, mandibles tight with rage, but eyes burning with something like respect. His surviving troops carried wounded comrades onto waiting dropships, silent under the weight of what they had lost. Entire battalions gone, weapons shattered, a planet turned into a graveyard. Yet Hawk had kept his word. He had fought beside them when he could have abandoned them to die. That mattered in ways words could not touch. The commander paused before boarding his dropship and met Hawk's gaze. The translation disc crackled. "Today you proved your world is no longer a joke," it said simply, before turning away. Miller leaned against the cracked wall nearby, face streaked with grime, grinning through exhaustion. "Well," he said, "I guess we win by default." Ramirez snorted softly while cleaning his rifle. Nothing about this felt like winning, not with the jungle still smoking around them, and the air reeking of blood and burned metal. Chen sat on the steps of the ruined command tower, rolling a dead detonator between his fingers like he could not quite believe it had been stopped in time. Fingers plucked at his battered guitar with hands still shaking from the override job, the notes thin but stubborn in the silence after so much chaos. As the dropships lifted the wounded skyward, Hawk gathered the team. The Coalition Council would meet in orbit to decide the contest's outcome now that the sabotage had been exposed. The rogue faction's leaders would stand trial. The Skornith, if it still lived out there in the burning jungle, would be hunted down with enough firepower to level mountains. But none of that changed what the MACV-SOG team had done here. They had survived the deadliest planet in Coalition territory, fought through alien armies, stopped a conspiracy, and lived to tell about it. No one in the galaxy was laughing now. They boarded a transport under a sky bruised black with smoke. From orbit the scars across Zeros 9 were visible even through the cloud cover, whole stretches of jungle flattened by fighting or burned by plasma fire. Yet even as the transport climbed toward the waiting fleet, Hawk watched the trees far below sway in the wind like nothing had happened. The planet would swallow its wounds, bury the wreckage, and keep breathing like it always had. Men came and went. Zeros 9 endured. In the council chamber above the planet the debate did not last long. Too much evidence. Too many witnesses. The rogue faction's representatives were dragged out in chains while the coalition leader, the towering insectoid who had announced the contest days ago, addressed the chamber in a voice like grinding stone. Earth had not only survived the trial but exposed treachery at the highest levels. The bet stood. Earth had won. The words echoed through the chamber as Hawk and his team stood at the center floor, uniforms torn, boots still streaked with mud and blood, faces unreadable under the flood of alien stares. The Council granted Earth its seat with full honors. Trade rights. Political autonomy. A voice among the stars. But it was the soldiers, not the diplomats, the galaxy remembered. Footage of the MACV-SOG team spread across 1,000 systems, the ambushes in the rain, the night battles lit by plasma fire, the final assault on the rogue base with the Scorneth tearing through walls beside them. The aliens had mocked Earth's old-fashioned rifles and low-tech gear before the contest began. Now they gave the team a name whispered with something close to fear. The Ghosts of Zeros 9. Back aboard the transport, Fingers strummed a few broken chords on his guitar while Miller dug through ration packs looking for anything that had not been crushed during the fighting. Ramirez sat by the window watching the burned jungle drift below. Chin cleaned his gear with methodical calm. Hawk sat apart from them, smoking his last cigar down to the nub while reading the Council's final declaration on a cracked datapad. Victory felt strange after so much loss. Necessary but hollow. When they landed on the Coalition flagship for the award ceremony, the team filed out in the same muddy, battered uniforms they had worn through the entire mission. No polished armor. No speeches prepared. The Council leader announced their names before the galaxy and presented each of them with medals forged from Coalition Star steel, honors given only to the rarest acts of courage. Miller accepted his with a crooked grin. Chin nodded once, already glancing at the nearest exit like he wanted a drink more than a medal. Ramirez stood stiff and silent as always. Fingers saluted with one hand while holding his guitar in the other. Hawk accepted last, his face giving nothing away though the weight of it settled across his shoulders like another campaign finished. That night in the flagship's mess hall the team finally sat down to something close to peace. Real food instead of ration bars. Real chairs instead of mud. Fingers played his guitar off-key until Miller threatened to throw it out the airlock. Chin actually laughed at that, a rare sound from him. Ramirez said nothing, just raised a glass in the quiet way of men who let actions speak louder than words. Hawk smoked and watched them, the corners of his mouth shifting almost, but not quite, into a smile. The news spread fast through the Coalition fleets. Earth soldiers had faced the worst planet in known space, the deadliest predator in its history, and a conspiracy powerful enough to burn whole worlds, and they had walked out alive. The same alien commentators who had mocked them before now spoke the new name with something like awe. The Ghosts of Zeros 9. A title that would follow them across the stars. Before departure, Hawk stood alone at the viewport looking down at the planet one last time. The fires had burned low now, leaving only smoke curling through the endless green. Somewhere out there the Scorneth still lived, too smart and too fast for even the Coalition hunters to find yet. Maybe it always would. Some things belonged to the wild no matter how many empires tried to cage them. Hawk lit his last cigar and watched the jungle disappear under the clouds as the ship turned toward Earth. The mission was finished. The bet was won. The galaxy would never laugh at Earth again.